Can anyone still call for a slowdown if the team whose job it was to do so are being dissolved? At the end of July, OpenAI disbanded its preparedness team, one of many moves that they are making as they head toward a planned IPO. The dedicated safety checkpoint disappeared just when the pressure to look ready peaked. In the meantime, both OpenAI and Anthropic have admitted they are internally using models they won't broadly release due to what they call safety concerns. Here's the claim I'll stand behind. Companies that won't sustain checkable internal safeguards and won't open their model weights to outside scrutiny have no standing to turn marketing disguised as caution into a break that only everyone else has to comply with. That's today's lead. Also in today's episode, an open model price war, the hard limit in autonomous research, and Washington asking partners to choose a camp. Come with me, let's get into it. Anyone asked to trust OpenAI's next model just lost a clear answer to one basic question: who inside the company can still say, "Don't ship this yet"? Assessing that risk was the preparedness team's job. It studied catastrophic risks in things like biology and cybersecurity and misuse before a model shipped. OpenAI disbanded that team apparently at the end of July. So did the safety work disappear with it? Well, OpenAI said no. The company described the move as integration and said the risk work continues, just distributed. Its specialists moved into existing teams. So that could preserve expertise. It could even put safety specialists closer to the people building each system. A central group can become an unnecessary bottleneck, especially when models change faster than a small team is able to test them. Yet, the team's value came from its separate charter as well. It existed to slow a release when everyone else had reasons to keep moving. Distributing the staff removes that single visible checkpoint. It also makes it harder to know who is responsible when something goes wrong. Now, the timing is what makes it especially difficult to actually just accept that this is a good thing on OpenAI's word alone. The company is preparing what could become one of the largest public offerings ever assembled. Its annualized revenue is set to top $40 billion. Investors reward growth and readiness and fast releases. A team whose job includes saying "not yet" sits directly against that pressure. OpenAI hired Dylan Scandinaro from Anthropic in February to lead preparedness, and he now works on recursive self-improvement, systems helping to improve the systems that follow them. Jan Lakey left OpenAI in 2024. He told the Financial Times that the company had come to favor shiny products over the slower work of actually measuring what those systems can do. Now, this also follows the safety staff exits that we covered in the July 11th edition of the Century Report. The need for checking has not gone anywhere. The burden has simply moved outward. And right now, there is no single broadly recognized independent certification body that governs what frontier labs report about their own models. Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei stepped into that gap on Sunday. Investor Gavin Baker argued that Amodei's warnings helped drive the backlash against AI, especially against data centers. He said that Amodei had lost the argument on regulation. Amodei answered, and with unusual directness too. "I think it is fundamentally a crisis of trust. Ordinary people don't trust companies, governments, or the tech industry and always suspect that we are cooking up some new way to screw them over." He also conceded that AI firms haven't yet delivered on our big promises to benefit the world. He said that the only way to do that was something like actually curing cancer. Now, he is right that delivered benefit will carry far more weight than another corporate promise or a trust me bro. Trust depends on whether people can check the promise before the grand payoff arrives. A cure for cancer does not excuse weak oversight any more than oversight can substitute for a cure. Now, Amodei again backed a regulator modeled on FINRA, which is the industry-funded body that oversees American broker-dealers. And he actually said that Anthropic tries to make proposals that disadvantage or slow down frontier AI companies while advantaging smaller competitors. Now, helping smaller competitors does sound healthy, even though Anthropic's actual history of doing so is gray at best. But giving an industry-shaped regulator the power to decide who moves and how quickly carries an obvious capture risk. The current leaders know the systems, they employ the experts, and they have the money to shape every technical rule. So when a narrow safeguard targets one clear danger, it can make the whole effort more solid. It should be, however, independently tested, publicly checkable, and built so that smaller groups can still retain access. A general slowdown designed by the companies already in front does something else. It freezes the field at the moment that those companies hold the lead. So what this means is the labs no longer get to just ask for trust as a substitute for actual proof. Now, fortunately, people outside those labs are starting to build the proof themselves. But even so, the biggest display of trust would be to actually open these models to outside testers and not just governmental ones. All right, while the labs debate who should oversee the frontier, every company charging for model access is exposed to a family of models that people have downloaded 3 billion times now. Alibaba's Qwen has now passed Meta's Llama and Google's Gemma to become the most downloaded open model family in Hugging Face's 2026 report. Now, what does a download counter change about the AI business itself? Open weights, as you know, are model parameters that anyone can download and run. Closed models stay behind a paid service where the provider sets the price and controls access. Downloads alone don't prove that one model gives better answers per se than another. Hugging Face's summer report makes a different point, though. The models that people discuss and star are rarely the models that they actually download and use. In Hugging Face's 2026 report, small, stable systems account for more than 83% of model downloads. Now, Qwen's lead on that is enormous. In Hugging Face's 2026 reporting period, Llama had 227 million downloads, and Gemma had 418 million. Alibaba says that Qwen crossed 3 billion downloads across platforms and spawned more than 150,000 derivatives. Chinese labs are also releasing open models at much larger parameter scales than most American labs. Each release gives developers another base that they can change, improve, and run without asking anyone for permission. So the price structure starts to crack when that capability reaches a laptop. Developer Simon Willison tested Qwen 3.H27B using a quantized model file of about 17 gigabytes. It can work with images and long documents, and it ships under Apache 2.0, which is a license that allows free commercial use and modification. There is no API key because the model runs on your own hardware. Willison described it as frontier class. Now, that was his hands-on judgment rather than an actual benchmark result. He did ask it to do his usual Pelican as an SVG image, and it spent 21 minutes or so thinking. He called the result the best of the Pelican images that any local model has produced thus far. Now, the long wait also shows that local capability still comes with pretty rough edges. A model can overthink a very simple request, for example. Personal hardware won't deliver the speed of a giant data center. Open weights also place more responsibility on whoever is actually running them. Even so, paid APIs are starting to look like bottled water beside a public tap. The public version may run more slowly, but it sets a ceiling on what the bottle can even cost. According to Silicon Data's LLM token index, average American lab inference prices fell about 24% between mid-July and mid-August. OpenAI cut the price on GPT 5.6 Luna by 80%. Anthropic priced Opus 5 at half the price of Fable 5. Tech Republic reports that DoorDash and Airbnb are already routing some work to Chinese open models. Meanwhile, the same American labs are preparing public offerings, with OpenAI reportedly considering a valuation near $1 trillion, and Anthropic getting there as well. Those valuations assume that they can keep charging a premium for scarce access. 3 billion downloads say scarcity is draining faster than their prospectuses can preserve it. So that is a hopeful part of this. Increasingly, anyone can set the price of useful intelligence just by downloading a model, changing it, and running it for the cost of electricity and hardware. All right, as capability spreads beyond company gates, any scientist relying on an autonomous result needs to know whether that system can rebuild established work or create something genuinely new. How far has AI research crossed that line? An autonomous research system can form a plan, it can run experiments, it can check the results, and it can choose what to try next without a person necessarily having to guide every step. Companies have made big statements about that capability. Outside measurement, though, has lagged behind. Two groups have now started filling that gap. Inherent Labs introduced Faraday, a 27 billion parameter system that it calls an AI scientist. Faraday can use GPT 5.5 codecs inside its own workflow, much as a human researcher might use a specialist program. The group tested it on Replica, which is a set of 310 tasks taken from 100 machine learning and AI for science papers. The goal was really easily understood: reproduce the figures reported in those papers. In Inherent's Replica benchmark, Faraday outperformed Claude Opus 4.8 and GPT 5.5 at that specific task. A much smaller, specialized system beat two closed frontier models at reconstructing published results. Now, that says nothing about general ability, but it does say a lot about how much research skill can now fit into one small system. Prime Intellect also tested a harder question. It ran 153 autonomous experiments across 18 frontier models. Each system tried to train a small GPT model faster than was possible previously. Now, some attempts at this ran for 8 days across 8 high-end GPUs. Fable 5 and Opus 5 pulled well ahead of the rest. So Prime Intellect credited what it called a research taste, which is the judgment to choose the promising idea instead of an idea that sounds merely plausible. And then came the boundary. In Prime Intellect's assessment of all 153 runs, no model produced a fundamentally new method. It classified every successful approach as a variation or recombination of something already found in the research literature. So picture a researcher sprinting through a vast library, pulling useful pieces from distant shelves and rebuilding an experiment quickly. These systems can already do that, but they haven't yet written books to fill a new shelf. But that distinction doesn't actually make the result any less important, because replication itself is slow, expensive, and essential. That means a system trained to reproduce published findings across hundreds of benchmark tasks could help expose errors and test whether results actually hold up, freeing human researchers for harder questions. Combining the pieces in new and innovative ways never tried before can also produce discoveries. But for now, origination remains an honest floor on this. The models haven't shown that they can reliably create a fundamentally new research method, at least not yet, and at least not under this test. Now, the strongest part of both of these projects may be how they reported the work. Inherent Labs and Prime Intellect published their traces, test setups, and task lists. Other people can go in and inspect the attempts, and they can run the tests again for themselves. Yesterday, we covered Anthropic's admission that its own task-based evaluations no longer capture increases in models' capabilities. Today, outside groups brought out new rulers and handed everyone a copy. That is how the verification gap closes. Measurement stops belonging to whoever has the strongest incentive to grade itself generously. All right, those public models and open experiments cross borders easily, while a reported draft letter from the United States warns 35 countries that access to American chips, models, and minerals may depend on choosing the right friends. A State Department draft letter reviewed by Reuters tells nations in the U.S.-led AI opportunity statement to pick one coalition. They can remain inside Pax Silica, which is the American bloc, or join Beijing's New World Artificial Intelligence Cooperation Organization. They can't do both. Why is Washington trying to make an open technology exclusive? The draft reaches for a schoolyard line. To be part of everything is to be part of nothing, it says. And then it gets more direct. You can't have it both ways. Now, Kazakhstan already does have it both ways. It joined both frameworks, which apparently made it the immediate problem that this letter aims to solve. There's genuine leverage behind the warning, too. Pax Silica offers privileged access to chips, frontier models, and critical minerals. A government can try to restrict chip exports. It can steer mineral contracts. Countries caught between these blocks may actually lose some physical infrastructure that they can't easily replace. Those costs will fall on people trying to build local industries, research programs, and public services. They didn't design this great power contest, and yet they'll absorb the disruption when one capital orders another to choose. However, as we continue to cover, this ultimatum fails where capability continues to turn into downloadable files. Beijing built its AI ecosystem around open weights. Qwen has 3 billion downloads, as we just talked about, and it has helped push American model prices down across the market. Any government in any country can download a leading release the day that it appears. Nobody can recall every copy afterward. So this letter looks less like confidence and more like insecurity pretending to be leverage. It reads like a child telling the other kids at school which friends they're allowed to have if they want to stay friends with them. That behavior extends beyond one administration. The American state and its for-profit AI companies have spent years treating access as a loyalty lever. Closed systems make that possible because the owner can cut off an account. Open weights, however, remove the switch entirely. A strong American coalition should be able to keep partners by offering better terms, broader benefits, dependable infrastructure, and genuine cooperation. If its advantage requires nations to ignore freely available capability, then the offering has already lost part of the argument. Kazakhstan now becomes the test. Washington can eject a member from a gated coalition, but it can't stop that country from using a model that anyone on Earth can pull at any time. The more intelligence spreads, the less sense it makes to organize human progress like rival private clubs. Capability is becoming a shared layer, and any coalition that wants to last will have to offer more than just arbitrary permission. All right, closing it out for today. So who has standing to say that everyone has to slow down? A person who can point to a specific danger, show the evidence clearly, and offer a check that outsiders can also verify has earned a hearing. That kind of safeguard helps capability travel farther because people can see why it holds. The companies already in the frontier haven't earned a blanket break that only applies to everyone else merely by describing themselves as cautious. OpenAI removed its dedicated preparedness checkpoint as the company approached a huge public offering. Anthropic's CEO did admit that the industry has not delivered its promised benefits and now continues to back a regulator shaped like an industry-funded body. At the same time, the world outside those companies kept moving. Qwen crossed 3 billion downloads and pushed paid model prices lower. Faraday packed frontier-level replication skill into a specialized 27 billion parameter system. Independent researchers published their tests so that anyone could inspect the work, and Washington found that it can control chip shipments with a loyalty ultimatum, but downloaded weights simply cross that boundary anyway. There's friction here, and people depend on today's safeguards. We do need checks that can stop a specific, proven harm before it spreads, but slowing the whole field would preserve the exact concentration now failing the trust test. It would give today's leaders more time to build the rules, shape the regulator, and decide who else gets to receive access. The better path, then, is accountable, mutual acceleration, capability spreading widely, risks tested openly, and claims checked by people who don't depend on the company making them. But that future is, in many ways, already taking shape. Now, the lab's rulers may be failing, but new ones are appearing. Prices are falling, models are moving onto personal machines, research tests are becoming reproducible, borders built around permission are giving way to access that travels on its own. Now, Dario Amodei called this a crisis of trust. The answer to lost trust is to allow more people to inspect, build, and share. See you tomorrow.